Hi there, I'm Mark Shamma'a, and I'm going to talk to you about the Change Management Canvas. This is a tool that I've developed to help us design and plan change management programs for organizations. So the Change Management Canvas is a tool that takes us on a journey of change that starts at A and goes to B via a point C, somewhere in between. And C is when the change happens, C for change. A is the A state of the organization, and B is the objective B state of the organization. And what we want to do is manage the change along that journey. The change journey is broken up into three stages. There's the pre-change phase, there's the change phase itself, and then there's the post-change phase. This is very similar to Levin's 1947 model, where he talked about unfreeze, transform the organization, and then refreeze the organization. And you'll find that many of the ideas here are built on the thinking of previous thinkers on the business front. So let's have a look at some of these things in more detail. Now, the pre-change phase, I divide into two separate phases. There's the early pre-change phase and the late pre-change phase. The early pre-change phase is useful for planning, but for the people affected by the change is too far off in the future for them to actually take an active interest in what's happening. Excuse me. Whereas the late pre-change phase, the change itself is imminent, and they begin to take an active interest, they begin to show concern, or what do I do, when do I do it, what's happening, and so forth. That kind of question arises. During the change, of course, things are happening, but it's only at that point that theory turns into practice, or if you prefer, when the rubber hits the road. And then the post-change phase is when we kind of settle and embed our changed organization into the new business as usual routine, which is the objective of the program, i.e. the B state. So let's have a look. In my view, the journey of change has 7 steps. There are 2 steps in the early pre-change phase. There's a further 2 steps, steps 3 and 4, in the late pre-change stage. During the change, that's change the point C, it's actually step 5. So we've got different ways of saying the same thing. Change happens at step 5, or the change phase, phase 2. And then post-change, phase 3, we have a further 2 steps. So it's actually quite a logical structure, 2, 2, 1, 2. 2 in the early pre-change, 2 in the late pre-change, the change itself, and then 2 in the post-change phase. Each of these change phases can be associated with a certain kind of mindset, a certain kind of activity. And again, we'll find that this is similar to, for example, the St. Elmo Lewis model of 1898, ADA, which stood for attention, information, desire, and action, and was supplemented at a later stage by satisfaction, very much about sales and marketing. We also have the ADKAR model by Prosci or Prosky. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that correctly. And the ADKAR model has some similarities to this. And that was based, it seems to me, very much on the St. Elmo Lewis model. So assess is the first stage. Assess is when we as change managers go into the organization and begin to find out what's going on, what's been told to the people, what they know already, what they're expecting, if they have any awareness at all of the situation. And basically we design and set up the change management program. This period should take place as quickly as possible in order for people to, for us actually, the change managers to get on with the change itself. Stage 2 is information. Again, very similar to the St. Elmo Lewis model, which had stage 2 as I for information as well. And this is where we go from kind of our receive mode, what's going on in the assess phase, to the information phase, which is let's start disseminating facts and let's quell any rumors, any misperceptions or misconceptions, and let's get the facts out to the people so that they know what's happening, they know when it's happening, and any questions that they may have are addressed to the best of our ability at this point. To some extent, the information phase continues throughout the program. We set up the cadence of communications, whether it's monologic, such as newsletters, us to them, or dialogic, us engaging with change champions, us engaging with the wider staff, with managers and leaders and so forth, which I'll come to in a second. The third stage is about desire. Now, we've now moved into the late pre-change stage. In other words, the change itself is coming within visible distance, if you like. The light at the end of the tunnel is visible, whereas at assess and information, the change is still quite a way off. At the desire stage, as the name implies, we want people to start looking forward to the change, not to be afraid of it. In information, they started to know all about it, but it was still too far off for them to be really kind of excited by it or concerned about it. At stage 3, as we're getting into the late pre-change stage, they'll start getting concerned. They'll think, what's going on? How's it affect me specifically? And when is it going to affect me? So we want to turn that frown upside down, so to speak. And any concerns they have, we want to get them excited about it and tell them about the good things that the change is going to bring. It's not just propaganda. We need to be transparent about, there is no pain without, there's no gain without pain. You have to break a few eggs to make an omelet, that kind of thing. But let's face it, we wouldn't be doing a change program unless there were business benefits and organizational benefits. And after all, this is an organization that we're working for. It's an organization that we want, for which we want the performance to be improved. And that should be what the change program is all about. Now we get close to the change itself, and really it's about ability, the ability to make the change. What do I do? When do I do it? How do I do it? When is it going to be? What happens if I don't do it? Because there will be consequences if we don't do things on time. And basically, getting ready for the change, for the go live date, which happens at C, the change, step 5, when things happen. Now, change can happen in a number of ways. Change can be a kind of sudden thing. You kind of move out of an office on a Friday and move into a new office on a Monday. Or it can be gradual over a period of time, a bit like getting a driving license. You've been driving the car, you've been on the road for a few months, but now you've got a piece of paper that says you're qualified to drive, having passed the test. So there's a gradualist approach, an evolutionary approach, as opposed to the revolutionary approach, which is shut shop on Friday, reopen shop on Monday, in a kind of new way of doing things. A new business as usual, or a new reality. So once that step's done, we're moving to the step 6, which is settle. Settling in should take as little time as possible. People kind of let the dust settle. What's going on? Where is everything? Is the theory working out in practice as we expected it to? Is there any fine tuning? Is there any course correcting or kind of minor resets that we did not anticipate that we should be looking at? And I would say that the settle period should take place, somewhere between 2 to 6 weeks after the change goes live. After that, really, we're in kind of the closeout phase, which is to embed the change and for the change management team to step out of the fray and hand over to the in-house team to let them run business as usual and operations as it goes. So if you like, those are the 7 steps. It's a sort of elastic. There's an elastic component to the change program. The stages 3 and 4, the late pre-change process, could take maybe 2 to 4 months just to get a sort of a sense. And the settle, as I said, could 2 to 6 weeks, and embed no more than 2 to 3 months after the change goes live. I think the organization wants to get on with business as usual, and the idea that the change managers are still hanging around after like 2 to 3 months, like, well, what are you guys doing here? We're done now, aren't we? So there'll be a bit of a question mark as to what we're doing there. But the assess and information stage really depends on when the go live date is planned. So whenever the go live step 5 change program happens, we work backwards from that. We've got 2 to 4 months for steps 3 and 4. If we're 12, 18 months away from the go live, then that will inform us how long the assess and information phase lasts. But as I mentioned, assess probably needs to happen as quickly as possible. We need, as change managers, to get our heads around the organization in the assess phase, and I'd say 2 to 6 weeks is kind of the probably where we're at. Now let's step into the other 7 components. So the change management canvas is a journey in 7 steps, and here we've covered the 7 steps, but it's actually 7 journeys for the organization. Those 7 steps are comprised of the change makers and the change takers. The change takers are the people who will be affected by the change, if you like, the victims of the change, the people who are going to be changed, if you like, whether it's behaviorally, process-wise, attitudinally, all of those things, hard stuff like process or soft stuff like attitudes and behaviors and culture. And the change makers, that's 5, 6, and 7 here, the change makers are those who make it happen. So let's take a look at who those people are. Journey number 1 is perhaps what I call tier 1 of the organization. And that's usually the CEO or the general manager or the head honcho, if you like, of the organization. One person there who will be the person who sets the strategy, agrees the strategy, signs off on the strategy, and takes business critical decisions, and ultimately carries responsibility for the organization. Tier two is his or her board of directors. That could be the chief financial officer, the chief HR officer, chief operating officer, those kinds of people, heads of department, who are absolutely responsible for the overall management of the organization, if you like, the senior leadership team. So tier one and tier two together, a senior leadership team. Ballpark figure, maybe there's 20 people, could be 15, could be 10, could be 25, but that's the ballpark figure of how many people we'd expect to find in tier two that we'd have to engage with. And it's best that we engage with them directly, perhaps through a series of board meetings on a monthly basis, or steering committee meetings on a monthly basis. Tier three are the middle managers. Now, that's a very broad brush and a very, very deep layer, if you like. I've put here 100 people. It could be more, it could be less, depends on the size of the organization. And there could be multiple bands within tier three. You've got senior managers, you've got junior middle managers, and so forth. But their horizon is very different. Theirs is much more operational than the tier one, tier two people whose vision is much more strategic. And then lastly, we've got tier four, and that's the people. I've put here 1,000 people, but it could be any number from 100 to 1,000, again, depending on the size of the organization, or indeed several thousand. But what we want to do is make sure that these change takers, the journeys 1, 2, 3, 4 shown here, that they are all captured in the change management process. Now we come to the change makers. Now the first amongst these are the change representatives, or the change representative team. These are also known sometimes as change champions or change agents. It really depends on the terminology you want to use from your organization. But basically, we as change managers are not able to speak to 1,000 or several thousand people in tier four one-to-one. So we need a channel to make sure that everybody has one degree of separation from us to the tier four group. So that's what the change representatives do, or the change champions do. I've put 1 to 50. That suggests that one change champion represents about 50 people. It could be 1 to 20, 1 to 50. It really depends on the business units, the structure of the organization. And we'll always find a few, if you like, orphan business units which have only 1 or 2 people, and then it kind of doesn't make sense for them to have an individual change champion or change representative. You might find a kind of a group structure for certain change representatives there, representing lots of the smaller business units in one go. The idea is that information will cascade down from tier 1 and tier 2, the senior leadership team, to tier 3, perhaps via the change representatives who would be appointed by a tier 3 middle manager, and then communicate directly with the stakeholders in tier 4, so that the stakeholders always feel that they have a kind of 1 degree of separation from the change management team. I'll come to the change management team in journey number 7, but in between we still have the change enablers, the change enablers team. And here I estimate maybe 3 to 5 people as an example. Typically, it's HR, because they will set policies and standards affecting people in any kind of business transformation program. Typically also it might be technology, or the chief technology officer or his or her representative. Why? Because many transformation programs will involve the introduction of new technology and new processes. And then there may be sort of the chief real estate officer, the CRE, and that person is responsible for any physical transformation that takes place in the office. And that might include new facilities, new workplace experience, and clean desk policies, hybrid working, all of those things. So real estate, HR, and IT are the usual change enablers, but you might also find other people like maybe a chief culture officer, maybe union representatives, maybe sustainability officers, or some such diversity, equity, inclusion representatives in those change enablers to make a comprehensive change program. The change enablers, in summary, are the kind of, if you like, they're part of the engine room of the business. If you don't involve the change enablers, you can talk about all the transformation you want to, but someone has to effect the change, the policies and the processes that support those transformation programs. So finally, we come to the change management team, and who knows how big that is. Is it 1 person? Is it 5 people? Is it 25 people? Depends on the scale, scope of the transformation program. But the change managers also are going on a journey of change, because whatever they thought they were going to do at the assess phase is probably going to evolve and change throughout the program as we follow the 7 steps. I've been on programs where we've had mergers and acquisitions take place midway through the change program, which changes all the factors, all the kind of messaging of the change program. changes of leadership may change the direction of the change program and so forth. And also new things come to light during the change program that we have to take into account. So all these 7 different journeys are going on a journey of change. 4 of the journeys are those of the change takers, and the last 3 are those of the change makers, who may be drawn from the change takers. So you'll find that the change reps are drawn perhaps from tier 3 or tier 4. Change enablers, similarly, could be tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, head of HR, head of IT, the head of real estate, or their delegates are drawn from the change takers, but they are also influencers in the process. Change influencers is another way of calling those change enablers. So that's kind of the 7 journeys, and those are the 7 steps. So that's why it's a 7x7 canvas. Now, just to wrap up this concept of the change management program, we must remember that a change program is implementing a strategy, an organizational strategy, and something must have triggered that strategy at some point in the past and asked the organization or prompted the organization to evaluate its way of doing things. The change program should implement the strategy, but the strategy should make things better and should define what the B state needs to be and should understand what the A state needs to be and understand what the gap is. The change management program is getting us across that gap from the A state to the B state, but it is the implementation of a strategy, and the strategy itself may be a good strategy, it may be a bad strategy. That's not for the change manager to decide. So we may have a situation where the change management program has been implemented beautifully, but the strategy was flawed. It's not the fault of the change management program if the strategy is flawed. And it's a bit like saying the plane landed at the right airport. Or actually, the plane landed at the wrong airport, but it landed safely. The wrong airport being the wrong strategy, and the plane landed safely, and the change managers brought the plane into land. That's kind of one analogy. Another analogy is the operation was a great success. Unfortunately, the patient died. So again, those are kind of worst case scenarios. Really, we want to be sure that the strategy is robust. And in that assess stage, that's where the change manager needs to digest what is happening in the strategy, what the objective B is, and have great clarity on that one, and then plan and design your change management program across the 7 steps and across the 7 journeys in order to make that, to realize the change management program. And the last stage there would be benefits realization. Now, change managers can have a hand in helping to define what the change realization is, change benefits, what change benefits have been realized. But again, the B state has been defined by the organizational strategy, and the change management program needs to be targeted at realizing that. So that kind of summarizes the canvas of change, the 7x7 change management canvas. So all I can say now is thank you for listening, and good luck designing your change management programs. Thanks.